Okay, so let's go. So I'm going to talk about the physics of displaced phase transition from atomistic calculations. So I know here in the room we have theoreticians and experimentalists, so I will try to keep my presentation as easy as possible with the main take-home messages that you need to remember. But I will not go into too much details. Only at one point I will stay, will be a bit technical, but I will try to keep it quite open. And also it is the first lecture, and many of my presentation will be like an introduction to the next lecture that will go much further into the different topics. And we mentioned that in the lecture. And so, so we want to make a simulation of displaced phase transition. For first, I will describe what is a displaced phase transition, how do we distinguish it from other type of phase transition, for example. And then I will describe also how to describe it from a phenomenological Landau model. And then also what is the origin of this displaced phase transition and what is the microscopic origin of that. So I will introduce the model of the soft mode. Then we want to make a simulation at the atomistic level, and one of the best tool for that is the density functional theory, or DFT for the initials. And then I will give a very quick introduction to that as well, because so that you keep in mind what is a DFT and not to go too much detail, because only for DFT it can take 10 to 20 hours to give a good lecture on that. And then quickly after, then I will show you examples after introduction from the DFT, what we can do with DFT to describe the displaced phase transition, and how to fit any kind of model out of the DFT calculation. I will show applications of this type of simulation on baryon titanate and lead titanate that exhibits ferroelectric phase transition. And I will show also an example of strontium titanates with the anti-ferrodistorsive phase transition that are the main basic oxide perovskites that of this type of displaced phase transition, I would say. And then before going to the end, I will introduce quickly something that will be discussed with much more details by Julien Varignan, which is the notion of proper and not proper phase transitions that you can have within the displaced phase transition. That is quite important nowadays. And then I will go quickly and show you, because here in the abstract I mentioned also a bit the second principles calculation and the effective Hamiltonians, but that's, I will not have time to fully introduce that. But I will give you the main idea, and also we have one guy of the group here is going to present a poster that I will tell you. Okay, so first of all, what is displaced phase transition? So we say here we keep a description into a crystalline transition, means between a crystal structure to another crystal structure. So we'll not discuss melting temperature or stuff like that, melting phase transition. But I would say we can decompose mostly into two types of phase transitions. Those where you have a large atomic distortion, a light distortion of the lattice of your crystal, which is the case here, for example. Do you see the mouse, Vincent? Can you hear me? Do you see the mouse? It's okay or not? Yeah, okay, I saw her. Okay. So here I give you an example in 2D. So you have, let's say, a crystal made of squares of atoms placed on a square lattice like that are connected by the corner. And in this large type of distortion I'm talking about is typical for example, reconstructive phase transition or martensitics, where you have motion of the atoms and some diffusion of the atoms. And basically you have a breaking of the bonds, and you can see that, for example, here you go from a corner shared square to edge shared square. And you can see if you want to do that, you have to pull away one atom to make this kind of connection. But this kind of structural phase transition exists, is typically the reconstructive phase transition, and is breaking the bonds and doesn't respect the group-subgroup relationship. And I will say that is maybe the most common phase transitions are among these ones, but we are going to be interested by the displacive ones, because for some applications they are much more interesting, I think. And so, and on the other side, we have the small distortion ones. So for example, here keeping this square lattice where the square are connected by the corner, here you can suppose that you have a small motion of the atoms that looks like a rotation of the squares. And you can see that you have a small distortion, a small displacement of the atoms, the red dots here, away from the initial position, the high symmetry position, let's say. And this type of distortion is what we call a small distortion. And among this one, basically you keep the bonds of the structure of the crystal, and you have a group-subgroup relationship between the high symmetry and the lower symmetry that give rise to the transition here. And basically, among this small distortion type, there is, so I will not go into the debates, but I will present a simple picture, but there is still a debate about how to distinguish what is the exact distinction between a displacive flat transition and order-disorder flat transition. But you need to be aware that this is existing aside of the displacive flat transition. And since we're going to be interested in this small distortion type of phase transition and of the displacive one. And just to make the distinction between the two, I will give this picture. Is one of the pictures that can be given, even if some other can be given. But I like this one because I will be able to connect with the theory of the soft modes and the DFT calculations. And basically, if you suppose that you have the atom, each atom of the crystal here will be represented with a blue sphere here, and then each of these atoms will be filling energy well. And on the displacive type, we can see that at temperature that's higher than the critical temperature where you have the phase transition, where the phase transition takes place. You can see, okay, each atoms are going to fill a single well of energy. And this, with thermal vibration and so on, the atoms will oscillate within this well. So from side to side, you have different oscillations. And in average, statistically, on average, you have the mean position will be in the middle here of the well. And then when you suppose you cool down the temperature, this energy well is going to be to soften more and more. It is going very quite flat up to the time where below the critical temperature, you start to have a double well of energy. So it means that you can have two possible minima of the position of the atoms. And if we suppose we are into a monodomain, so the atoms are going to be in one of the two minima of the energy. Here, let's say on the left side, and then the atoms will oscillate now inside one of the double well. On the other side, the order-disorder, we say that's the main difference is when you are at high temperature, is that at low temperature you still keep this double well picture, but at high temperature you're still keeping this double well energy landscape, but now you have the thermal fluctuation are higher than the barrier of the double well that separates the two wells. And then you have oscillation of the atoms on the two energy minima that can be present here at high temperature. This means that if we say that in the displacive transition, we have a satellite that is mostly located at the center of the well, at the zero position, let's say, while for the order-disorder, you can have satellites away from the zero, even if in average you have zero. Okay, but in our case here, I'm going to describe mostly the displacive phase transition, which means will be the left side that is here, this type of phase transition. So let's see what we can do from that. So finally, this is, let's say, a global, less schematic picture, a very basic schematic picture, but where this displacive phase transition is coming from actually. And the main theory to describe that is the soft mode theory. And in this theory, you suppose that, okay, you have different vibrations of the crystals that are the phonons. And then if you look at the evolution of the frequencies of these phonons versus temperature, you find that here, if this is a plot, a schematic plot of the square of the phonon frequency versus the temperature. And you find that one of the phonon frequencies is going down with temperature, and the square of the frequency is going down linearly with temperature up to the critical temperature where you have a crossing to zero. So it means because you cannot have negative phonon frequencies or negative square frequencies of the phonons. And this means that's, okay, below that, you have the critical temperature. Why? Because, okay, below that, you go to another phase. And basically, the description is that if you see me here on the side, that you have a vibration of the crystal at high temperature. Let's say we have two atoms and they vibrate like that. And then when you lower the temperatures, you see the frequency is going lower, 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 up to then at the critical temperature, poof, you have a freezing of the vibration of the phonons, and means that the atoms will say in one of the two ways, you can have that or that. And for example, here with two atoms. And this is what we call here that we suppose that, okay, in this we have oscillation of phonons that's lower in frequency, lower, 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 up to the time below critical temperature, the vibration stays into the crystal. And often is what we call a condensation of the soft mode or a freezing of the soft mode into the crystal structure, is what we call this way. And this means that is why here at high symmetry, it means it's a high symmetry phonon that condense or freeze into the structure. Okay, this is the simple picture, but what is the, this is the an example for transform tightness, going to see after from the DFT simulation. This is exactly what you observe, that you see here, these are the experimental measurements of the phonon frequency versus temperature, and you clearly see that the square of the frequency of one of the phonon is going down to 0, and below at the critical temperature that is here around 100 Kelvin, then you have the splitting of the modes, so means you go to a new phase. At high temperature, it is cubic, so you have only one phonon mode, and below the critical temperature is becoming tetragonal, and then you have the splitting of the modes, and then you have re-increase of the phonon frequencies. And basically, what is happening is that is why I like this picture here. At high frequency, you have an oscillation here in the single well, so you have one mode, and this oscillation, you see, you have is going to be smoother and smoother. The frequency is going to be smaller and smaller, and below a critical temperature, now you oscillate into one of the minima of the double well, and means the phonon frequency are going to be different. The oscillation inside this, in the well of the one of the two minima of the double wells is going to be different than the initial well. And this is basically what you observe here, that you have a phonon frequency that is going down to 0, and then it's going to split into 2 or more new phonon frequencies, because you are the atoms are going to fill a new energy landscape, energy wells into that. And finally, okay, this is the idea. And so now at the microscopic level, how can we describe this kind of phase transition? And how can we describe it also through, let's say, a phenomenological model? And on the phenomenological models, the most easiest one is the Landau theory. And in the Landau theory, basically, you want to describe the phase transition through what we call an order parameter. Here, we're going to call it Q. And this order parameter is what's going to characterize the phase transition of your system. And once you define this order parameter, then you can, Landau theory suppose that you can make an energy expansion, a Taylor expansion of the energy with respect to this order parameter. And basically, here you can see here the energy is going to be equal to a Taylor expansion. Here we have only the even terms that are staying, here Q square, Q4, and you have Q6, Q8, and so on, because your energy should respect the symmetries of the crystal, and here should respect the fact that plus Q or minus Q should give exactly the same energy in your system. And on the top of that, in the Landau theory, there are extra hypotheses that you suppose that the Q square coefficient term is going to be temperature dependent with this type of dependence, means T minus Tc. And that's it. And if you look carefully, it's really convenient to describe our type of phase transition, because why? Here you see if you suppose that A is positive, the A coefficient here is positive. Now, if T is larger than the critical temperature, larger than Tc, this coefficient is positive. This means here you have the Q squared term is positive, and this means that you end up with an energy landscape that is given by the green curve here, that is going to be given by a single well. You see here the minimum of this is going to be given at Q equal to 0 exactly. And then you have here the curvature of the energy is positive, because here this term is positive in front of the Q square. And this means, okay, for a temperature that is higher than the critical temperature, Landau theory will say, we suppose that, okay, you have a single well of energy landscape. And now if you have a temperature that is lower than the critical temperature, this coefficient is becoming negative. And this coefficient being negative of the Q square term, this means the harmonic part is going to be negative, means the curvature of the energy is negative at the origin here. And this means that, okay, if you have a negative curvature, means you can lower the energy with a non-zero value of Q. And then, of course, if you go beyond here, you have the Q4 term, and the higher terms are supposed to be positive here. And this means that you find that you have, if you solve this expression to be equal to 0, you find you have two minima, plus Q0 and minus Q0. And then you have an energy landscape of the system with respect to Q that shows this double well shape of energy. And this is really convenient, because also you can solve also this system to find what is the evolution of the Q0 value here. And if you plot it, you find that it is going to evolve that beyond the critical temperature, Q is equal to 0, the minimum of the energy at 0. Then it's becoming possibly to be non-zero for lowering of the energy. And the evolution of this Q0 is evolving as a square root with respect to the temperature. And it's basically what is observed experimentally on this evolution of the order parameter. If we're going to see how we're going to define now this order parameter in the following. Okay, so here again is really a simple presentation so that we have the picture of that, but we can discuss more into details this kind of theory because we can go much more complex than that. But the main picture, I think you need to remember, is this type of vision here that you have here. Okay, so now we have seen, okay, this is nice because we have this single way to double well expression. And now we have seen that also we have this source mode phonon theory, and we want to link it with the Landau model theory. That is here the Q order parameter can be the distortion of your crystal, but is mostly a macroscopic order parameter in the initialization of the Landau theory. But the thing that we know that we have experimentally, we have this softening of a phonon frequency. And then you can go back, okay, how the phonon frequencies can be evolving with temperature. And this is the basically what's one of the theory of the phonon-phonon interaction tells you, okay, the square of the phonon frequency is equal to the square of the phonon frequency at 0 Kelvin. And plus, then you have a thermal anharmonicities renormalization of the phonon frequencies with temperature. And then you recover this KBT functional, and then you have here alpha power 4 of each mod J here. So here is the sum of all the mods of your system, beside the 0, 1 that you want to analyze. And then here this alpha coefficient is simply the phonon-phonon interaction. So then you have a phonon and phonon interaction between the mod J and the mod 0 that you want to study. And that means you know that from the phonon-phonon harmonicity interaction, you know that you have this type of evolution of the phonon frequency. And now in our case, in the case of displaced fluctuation, we know that we have a critical temperature, whereas this omega square is equal to 0. So then we take this expression, we say, okay, it is equal to 0. And then this means that out of that, we solve that and we can extract what is the critical temperature out of that. Okay, if we suppose this type of interaction between the phonons. And this means that we have an expression for a critical temperature that gives rise to omega squared to equal to 0. So we have this expression here that we have here. It's really easy to solve it. And this means that we can put it back into the expression. And then at the end, we find that the square of the phonon frequency is simply equal to the square of the phonon frequency at 0 Kelvin times in simple T minus Tc variation divided by Tc here to have the exact expression. But you recover indeed that the phonon frequency, the square of the phonon frequency, is evolving linearly with the temperature. Okay. So now, this is what we have. So we can explain this, the observation of the softening of phonon frequency with respect to temperature with linear evolution of the square of the phonon frequency through this simple anharmonic phonon-phonon interaction. Okay. So now we know how the phonon frequency is evolving, but now we want to link that with the Landau model. And this is going to be easy in the sense that, okay, we have a softening of phonon frequency, but what it means, we have solved it for the frequency. But then we have seen in the picture, you see, if I have this picture that we have an oscillation of atoms, and then this oscillation of atoms are going to freeze into the structure. But I can take this atomic displacement. Let's say here I have one atom vibrating against the other one. But I can suppose, okay, this is, if I take that as the main distortion that drives the energy of the system. And this means that I can write the free energy expansion with respect to the eigenvector of the phonon. And then we can solve, I can say, okay, we have an energy expression that is going to depend on the atomic displacement square, I mean the phonon eigenvector square, plus the phonon eigenvector 4 and so on. And you can describe the energy landscape with respect to this pattern of displacement that I call it Xi. But this Xi is coming from the phonon vibration actually. And within this picture, this means that here the harmonic part here is directly proportional to the square of the phonon frequency that we have in the system. And this means that we have seen that with this phonon frequency, the harmonic parts of the energy, because I will show you just after that the phonon frequency are directly proportional to the second energy derivative of your system. And this means, okay, if the atomic displacements are the one given by the given pattern of displacement Xi, if this pattern of displacement corresponds exactly to the eigenvector of your phonon, this means the coefficient you have in front of the Xi square, the harmonic parts, is the phonon frequency. Because the phonons is the harmonic, is based on the harmonic theory. And this means that you can express your energy expansion with respect to this eigenvector. And then we have seen that the omega square is proportional to T minus Tc. So we can replace the omega square that we had solved before if we suppose that this omega square is going to cross zero at some critical temperature Tc. And we see that here, that means we have an expression with respect to the eigenvector of the phonons, Xi. And then we have here the harmonic coefficient is directly proportional to T minus Tc, which is very similar to the Landau expression we have formulated before, where we are supposed we have another parameter that is macroscopic Q, but that has this type of evolution with respect to temperature. And you can see that here you have direct relationship between the two. If you suppose that your what is driving the phase transition, the distortion of your crystal that is associated with the phase transition, is directly linked to the macroscopic order parameter. Means the order parameter is directly connected with the vibration of your phonon mode that is going to soften in your system. Okay, this means that we have a link between we have a direct link between a microscopic atomistic view with the phonons, which we are atoms that are vibrating, and a Landau theory that is macroscopic. Okay, which is really nice. It means that's okay. Which is not because when we are doing atomistic simulation, we're going to compute the phonon frequency and the phonon eigenvectors, atom by atom. And this means that if we can compute from an atomistic simulation this phonon frequency and the eigenvectors, this means we can build an energy expansion like that, and then we can build a Landau model out of it directly. And this is what we are going to see, that what we can do with DFT calculations. Finally, what we have, here you can see, here we have omega 0 in the expression here is the phonon frequency at 0 Kelvin. And basically, if you extrapolate here this softening of the phonon mode, you suppose that, okay, you can go to negative value of omega square, you end up that at 0 Kelvin, you have a phonon frequency that is negative. The square of the phonon frequency is negative at 0 Kelvin. And it's just that you have a normalization with the temperature that makes you positive beyond Tc. And the other thing, that's okay, we have linked here at T equal to 0. This means if we take the eigenvector of the high temperature phase, you see here we are using this is the phonon frequency and the eigenvector of the high temperature phase is beyond Tc. But we extrapolate to 0. We suppose we are at 0 K. We'll find omega square that is negative. And then we'll find that if Q is equal to 0, that the second energy derivative with respect to Q square, that is directly proportional to the Xi square, is negative. This means that we recover the fact that we have a formation of a double wall of energies, because that is directly linked to this expression here, because here the first term here is negative at T equal to 0. Means that here we have a negative curvature that is linked to the square frequency of the phonon that is negative. And then we can plot this double wall of energy, even if you do the calculation at T equal to 0. I mentioned that because you will see that the density functional theory is T equal to 0 theory. So once we make the simulation from DFT, you do a simulation at T equal to 0, but we're going to see we can nevertheless try to extrapolate the extra information even for phases that are not at 0 Kelvin. I mention that because it's often the main question that when the experimentalists are facing theoretician doing the calculation, they're asking, but you do a 0 Kelvin calculation, how can you connect with the high temperature? But it's a bit artificial, but we can still make some prediction at higher temperature, even if we are doing the calculation 0 K. I mean, we can extract some information that can be there. And so as well, here, this is a notion of these unstable modes, basically, because here the phonon frequency is going to square is going to be negative, and we find the mode is unstable in the sense that if you go on the left, on the right sides of these phonon displacements, you're going to lower the energy. So it means you have an instability into the system. We call it like that as well. Okay, and then as well in the DFT calculation, often you report not the square frequency, but the phonon frequency directly. So either you report the square frequency that's going to be negative, or you will directly see it from a phonon frequency directly that is not squared. This phonon frequency is going to be imaginary. So it's why here a calculation at 0 K even with DFT calculation, is going to be we're going to be able to identify what are the instabilities of the system. It means what kind of distortion allows to reduce the energy of the system through the calculation of the phonons, because we're going to see imaginary phonon frequencies. Okay. So now I described more or less the theoretical background for the soft mode theory and the Landau description of displacive phase translation. And now I'm going to go into the practice with, okay, let's do a DFT calculation from that. So before going to show you the output of a DFT calculation, since I'm giving the first lecture, you have more details in the following lecture for the magnetism from myself, and with Julien Varignan, you have much more details about the DFT calculation. But basically, the DFT calculation is what you want to solve at the microscopic level, means you want to solve all the interacting ions and electrons interacting together into a molecule or a crystal. And you can see here that's basically you want to try that at the quantum mechanic level. And the thing that it means that you need to take into account the interaction of all the particles together. Here I just show you an example with just 7 electrons and 1 ion in the center, 1 nucleus in the center. And you can see that you have to take into account many interactions. It's impossible to solve it analytically. So you can solve it numerically, but even so, that if you do that, it's going to cost a lot of CPU time. I think it was in the lecture of Feynman that he was mentioning that if you want to solve the carbon atom that is close to this one, it looks more like the nitrogen atom. You will need, if you want to solve it exactly from quantum mechanics, so we have the exact expression for the quantum mechanics, but solving that exactly, strictly speaking, with a good resolution, you will need all the protons of the whole universe to use it into like a supercomputer that is using all the protons of the whole universe to solve this only the carbon atom exactly. And why it is like that is because here you want to describe it with a wave function that's going to depend on all the position of the electrons and the position of the ions of your system. And the idea of how to simplify is what we call, this is also called a many-body problem to solve. And one idea of the density functional theory is going to say, okay, the thing is that we're going to replace the wave function with all the interacting electrons and atoms into simply a density of the electrons and the atoms position. So it means when you do that, it means that you reduce your system, all the electronic position to take into account as a parameter. Now you replace all the electrons by a density. This means that instead of having for each electron x, y, z position of this electron, you replace it by a given density, which is a value. The density is 1, 2, 3, 0.1, or whatever. And for each position, x, y, z. So you can see you can reduce a lot of the many-body problem for the electrons, because you go from all electrons position to be taken into account into simply a density of these electrons for each position of the space. And this is the idea of the density functional theory. It is really a theory in the sense that you have theorems that are proved mathematically. And what they prove is there are 2 main theorems of the density functional theory made by Hohenberg and Kohn that have published that you see in the 60s. And the first theorem is saying that actually there is a one-to-one direct correspondence between the potential in which the electrons are placed, and the ground state density. This means that, what does it mean? That because you see, if you go from the wave function to density, you can say, maybe you can have many densities that can solve the problem. They give rise to the same energy, let's say. But here they prove mathematically that no, if you have one potential, you have only one ground state density. This is really important because that's guarantee you that if you want to solve your system, you find one density, it will be the ground state density. You don't have 2 or more possible density that's going to solve your system. This is one thing. And then you have the second theorem is going to tell you, okay, now you have the energy that is a functional of the density. And then if you minimize this energy with respect to the density that minimizes the energy is the true ground state density of the system. This means that, okay, you guarantee that if you minimize the energy with respect to the density you found is only a single value. You have only one possibility, one solution, because of the first theorem. And this solution is the ground state density that guarantees it is the real ground state density of your system. And then, of course, it's still complicated. So you solve a bit the problem. It's still complicated to solve that because it's quite heavy. And then another extra thing was done by connection is that, as I mentioned, actually, if you suppose that you have fictitious non-interacting electron, means this is the picture I've done here, you have one electron interacting with the potential given by the rest. So you can take one electron one by one, and it says it's just going to fill the potential of all the rest in average. And then actually, if you do that, the density you found from this type of approximation is going to give exactly the same density as the true ground state density. So all of that is made to solve this Many-Modi problem. But the problem that even with that in the 60s, it was not possible to use it because it's still a heavy, it still remained to be a heavy calculations. And it's why then Walter Kahn got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1998 because since starting by the 80s, we started to have good supercomputers, and this type of density functional theory appeared to be quite very useful at the end. And then since then on, you have the DFT calculation has completely exploded. In the sense it's really robust, it's really quite good predictive power. And then you have many different type of codes here. I'm listing different of them. Abinit, VAS, Quantum Espresso, Crystal, Siesta. And you have many flagrants how to develop the DFT calculations. And each of these codes, depending each of these codes, we have different properties, different type of application, and so on. So we will go from one or the other one of these codes, depending on what you want to do. And also, it depends on which community you're going to start to work with. Then the community will work with some specific codes, depending on which one you are. Okay, so now we have means we have a numerical tool to make atomistic simulations. And the thing is that this DFT is really useful because once we have the density and the ground state density and the energy, means we can compute the forces and the stress. We have the Hellman-Feynman allows to get the first energy derivative with respect to the atomic displacement, for example, or the modification of the cell parameter that give rise to the forces and the stress. This means we can relax the structure, means we can minimize the forces and the stresses to see what is the atomic position that minimize the energy of the system. So for every atomic position, we can minimize the density that give rise to minimum of the energy for given atomic positions. But because we can compute forces and so on, we can say, okay, minimize the forces to see where the atoms are going to sit. That's going to minimize the energy of the system. So the mean we can do what we call a structural relaxation to find what is the ground state, atomic position, and cell parameters at 0 Kelvin. And to say all this theory is based on the 0 Kelvin temperature evolution. Then out of that, we can also extract, because we have the electronic density, we can compute the density of states. We can also compute the electronic band structure. We can also compute the ground state property like the polarization, magnetization, and so on and so on. And then we can also have access to any linear response properties and even non-linear response properties. And all these linear response properties are going to be useful for it because the second energy derivative with respect to atomic position gave rise to the phonon frequencies and eigenvectors. That's going to be really useful in our case. Then we can have also the derivative of the atomic position with the electric field that give rise to the bond effective charge. So how much the polarization is changed due to the atomic displacements. We can have access also to the permittivity of the system. Means how the permittivity change with respect to electric field. I mean, the polarizability change with electric field. And we can also have access to the elastic constant, the periodicity constant, and so on, and many properties can be calculated out of that. It's really nice because out of this microscopic simulation, atomistic simulation, we can compute microscopic properties that are directly accessible experimentally. So we can make a direct connection between the experiments and the theory, and the nice thing that the theory can have a look, okay, atom by atom and electron by electron, what's going on, and then we can try to explain, okay, why we observe this type of response of the crystal. Okay, so let's apply that to the few examples I mentioned before. So I propose to do that on the phototic displacive transition of baryon titanate and lead titanate, and the anti-for-dissociated transition of strontium titanate. So how do we do that? So let's start with baryon titanate. So baryon titanate is a cubic perovskite that I represent here. On the is a cubic structure. When on the corner, you can visualize it on putting on the corner the A cations, which is a formula unit AbO3. So A will be the baryon here, B the titanium, and the oxygen O here. You can see you have the baryon on the corner of the cube, you have the titanium in the center of the cube, and then you have the oxygens are forming an octahedra around the titanium like that.
And in many of these perovskites, when you have the high temperature, you have this cubic phase. And when you cool down this crystal with respect to temperature, you observe different structural phase transitions. And depending on the crystal, you have different type of phase transition. And in the case of barium titanate, you have a ferritic phase transition, and you see 3 successive phase transitions. This is what I'm showing here. This is the evolution of the cell parameters of barium titanate with respect to temperature. This is experimental measurements. The temperature is in Celsius. So in high temperature, beyond 100 Celsius, it is a cubic. You have this cubic phase. And then at a bit higher than 100 Celsius, you have a transition toward a tetragonal phase, where you can see that you have a splitting of the cell parameter between a long one and 2 short ones. So it's becoming tetragonal phase. And then you have development also of spontaneous polarization into the system. Here we suppose that the polarization will be along the Z direction, but it can be along X or Y direction is the same. Let's suppose it is along the Z direction. Then when you continue to cool down, you observe a second phase transition where now the polarization is not anymore in one direction, it is in 2 directions. And now the system is orthorhombic. And then when you continue to cool down even more, around minus 100 Celsius, it is becoming rhombohedral, where now the polarization is appearing to be in the 3 directions together, X, Y, Z direction. Okay, this is what we have, and then we want to simulate that from DFT atomistic simulation tool. And this is what we want to do. Okay, so let's start. This is, I will say, this is how do we identify from DFT a ground state structure from a crystal. This is, let's say, a guideline, main guideline for those doing DFT simulations. Basically, what you do, you start from the highest symmetry position you can have in your crystal. Here, for barium titanium, will be the cubic phase. And then you do the phonon calculations, and then you look, as I've mentioned before, to the phonon instabilities. So you look which phonons are imaginary. Why? Because here is what I'm re-mentioning here. If you plot the energy versus the pattern of atomic displacement, you find that for many of them, it means the curvature of the energy is directly connected with the square of the phonon frequencies. And usually when your system is stable, all the phonon frequencies are positive. Are real, and then it's because all the curvature of respect to any pattern of atomic displacement of our system is positive. However, if you have an instability, it means you have a pattern of atomic displacement that can reduce the energy of the system. So it means you can go lower in energy than the cubic phase in the case of barium titanate. And you're going to identify it because you're going to find imaginary phonon frequency because this pattern of atomic displacement is going to be associated with the negative curvature of the energy because you can lower the energy. And then once you identify that, okay, you know what kind of pattern of atomic displacement allows to reduce the energy is the eigenvector of the phonon that is imaginary here with imaginary frequency. So it means you can push your system here out of the high symmetry here, you are on the slope here. And then because from DFT we can compute the forces and so on, you say, okay, minimize the forces and the cell parameter. And then it means you can find what is the next energy minima you can reach. So it's what I call here full relaxation under the symmetry constraint of the unstable modes, because you see, depending on the pattern of displacement you have, depending on the phonons, we have some given symmetries, and then if you will go to a given space group, that is going to be fixed by the phonon symmetry initially on the high symmetry phase. And means you can do that, and then once you have done that, you go to a lower energy system, maybe you're going to reach an energy minima like that, and you recompute the phonons, and you check if you still have an imaginary frequency or not. If you don't have any more an imaginary frequency, means okay, you reach a local stability. That means your crystal is stable against all the local pattern of displacements, of atomic displacement in your system. However, if you still find an imaginary frequency, it means okay, you are not at the ground state. That means you take again the eigenvector of this new imaginary frequency, you condense it, you relax again, and see what is the new next energy minimum. And you do like that each time you don't find any more unstable mode in your structure. And once you don't have any more unstable mode in your structure, you can suppose that you have reached at least a local local stability. And ideally, if you explore sufficiently all the possibilities, you can suppose that you reach the ground state of the system. Okay, so let's do that in barium titanate. In barium titanate, okay, we have this cubic phase initially. We start to initialize the DFT. We just need, basically we need the cell parameters, initial cell parameters, and the atomic positions. So we can initialize the cell parameters and the atomic position coming from the experiments if we have them. And then we can impose here the cubic symmetry in your calculation. So it means we impose at 0 Kelvin the cubic symmetry. And because this cubic symmetry is not the ground state at 0K, we're going to see that there are ways to lower the energy of the system. So just means there is that. And this is the output here from a DFT calculation. This is the phonon dispersion curve of barium titanate at 0 Kelvin from DFT, from a given pass in the zone boundary, the Brillouin zone. And as we can see here, I plotted here the phonon frequency are positive here, and the imaginary frequency are plotted here with negative numbers. And you can see that in barium titanate, in gamma, X, and M, you have quite a strong branch of instability that is propagating here between X and M almost constants. And then when you go to R points, it's going to be positive. And then if you look carefully now at gamma, what it means, that's at gamma points. If you look carefully, okay, at gamma point, let's analyze the gamma point instability. You find that it is a polar instability, means the mode is polar, is infrared active, if you prefer. And the symmetry of the modes here is going to be given by Maël Guénou in his lecture, how to identify the symmetries of the phonons and so on. And here you have a polar modes, and for each phonon frequency you have an eigenvector associated to it. And if you look carefully, the eigenvector here can be along X, Y, or Z because it is cubic. So the three directions are equivalent by symmetry. This is why you have a degeneracy of 3. Actually, you have 3 phonons with the same frequency, but depending on which direction you go, X, Y, or Z. And if you look carefully, what is this eigenvector? You see that it is the titanium going one way and the oxygen going the opposite way. So basically, here you can say you have an oscillation between, let's say, titanium going down, oxygen going up, or titanium going up and oxygen going down. And if you take this type of eigenvector displacement, atomic displacements, and you freeze it into the structure, and you find this energy landscape. This means that here for every amplitude, you put different type of amplitudes of this pattern of distortion into the structure, and you compute the energy for each case, and you find this energy, the double wave energy landscape, as we have mentioned before. And this means here you can say, okay, at the minimum of the energy, I'm supposed to reach the minimum of the energy, you mean to reach the ground state of the system. And the thing is that if you look carefully, here you have the titanium as a positive charge and the oxygen as a negative charge. You clearly see that this mode is infrared active, means it is polar. So this is the picture with the eigenvector. And now what we need to know, we have no guarantee that the eigenvector energy landscape will be the final distortion in your crystal. You see, the eigenvector is going to give you, the phonons are calculated here. This is the harmonic part of this place here. It doesn't mean that when you go away from these points, the harmonic calculation is still valid. So to that means that you know what is the path to lower the energy. You know it because it's going to be given by the vector of displacement given by the eigenvector of the phonons, unstable phonon, which is given here, the titanium going up, oxygen is going down. Okay, this means that's okay. We can place ourselves, let's say, at the minimum of the energy here, and then we do a full structural relaxation. And indeed, we end up to a tetragonal space group of the P4MM, which is a polar space group, number 99, which corresponds to the first ferrotic phase rotation of barium titanate, where the polarization is pointing only in one direction. And out of the DFT calculation, you can compute what is the gain of energy with respect to the cubic phase. Here is about 20 milli-electron volts. And we can also compute the polarization. And here we find that the polarization is about equal to 30 microcoulomb per square centimeter, which corresponds quite well with the experiments, experimental measurements. Okay, so this means that we could reach this phase. And now, as I mentioned, it's something that is going to be important. This is going to be the technical points, the most technical points. It's going to be important for those doing the DFT calculation, and we have to solve this kind of displacement phase transition. But now we have a final distortion that can write down as a vector as well, as an eigenvector. And here I'm going to call it, you see the final distortion means you see the DFT is going to minimize the forces. It means we are going to find some atomic positions for the oxygen, the barium, and the titanium. And then we can see how much the crystal has been distorted with respect to the cubic phase. And it means that from the cubic phase, how much the atoms have displaced is what I'm showing you here. Means you can define it as a vector. It's delta Z, I call it, because here we consider only the Z direction of the displacements of the atoms. And where we have for each atom, barium, titanium, and the 3 oxygens, the motion with respect to the high symmetry position phase, the cubic phase, along X, Y, and Z. And we can see here we have only displacement along Z because I induce the distortion only in this Z direction. We can see that the barium is not moving, is almost not moving. Then we have the titanium is moving up, and then we have the oxygen moving down like that. This is in a reduced coordinate, this is a scale with respect to the cell parameter of the system. And you can see that the displacements are really small, but they are the ones that are giving rise to this large polarization at the end. So it means you clearly see that this is really a displacive transitions. In the sense that this definition, we have a small distortion of the crystal with respect to the initial phase. Okay, but now we want to identify, is this final distortion correspond to the eigenvector of the unstable mode that we have at the beginning? And to estimate that, we do what we call a phonon eigenvector projection. And basically, this is a technical detail that's often I remark that nobody is understanding, but I think it's because you see, we have a basis of 3n eigenvectors from the phonons, and these eigenvectors are orthonormalized. Means they are orthogonal to each other, and they can be normalized to 1. And this means that they form a basis set that can be used to project any vector in this multidimensional space. And this is just to show you a picture. Let's suppose that you have only x, y, z 3D case. And you can take any red vector that is here, that is quite general, and any red vector in this 3D space can be projected along X, Y, and Z. And then you have how much this delta vector has a component along X, along Y, along Z. But then we can do that with the phonons as well. But even if now we have 3n eigenvectors, so it's a 3n dimensionality, means instead of having X, Y, Z, we have all the phonon eigenvectors. But because they are all orthogonal and normalized to 1, they form a basis set that is complete. And means any distortion of the crystal delta here can be projected against the eigenvector. This means that when you have a distortion delta of your crystal here, like here it is going to do it for barium titanate here along distortion along Z, we can project against all the phonon eigenvectors, and we can see, okay, this distortion is coming from which type of eigenvector displacements on this basis set. And this means that here you see the delta distortion that I'm writing here can be projected, can have a component against all the phonon eigenvector of the phonon calculation we have done at the cubic level. And then here's this is the technical detail. Another subtlety that you need to normalize these vectors not with respect to themselves, but with respect to the mass. Because you see, when the atom displaces, they have some inertia due to the mass. You see the barium is really heavy with respect to the titanium and the oxygen, and you need to take into account that. And usually when you do this type of projection, you take what we call the eigen displacements, where the eigen displacement, usually you normalize the eigenvector with respect to the mass. This means that you plug this, what we call a mass matrix. So for every atom, you take into account the mass of it, and then you now normalize the eigenvector with this mass matrix in between. So this means that now you take into account, okay, the displacement of the atoms, so you take into account as well that the fact that they have a mass, and some atoms will move less because they are heavier than the other ones. And it's what we see here for barium titanate, you see, the barium is not moving so much because it's much heavier than the other one. Okay, this means that we have a complete orthogonal basis set coming from the phonon eigenvectors, and then we can normalize now our pattern of displacement here as a vector of the system, and then we can project into the basis set of the phonons eigenvectors. And then when we do that, we find that you see you make a projection of the delta distortion, theoretic distortion, against all the eigenvectors of the system that I call them Xi here. And you find that the unstable mode along Z, the eigenvector of the stable mode along Z, give rise to a projection that is about 98%. And the projection against all the other eigenvectors for all the other phonons is almost 0. So this is perfect. This means that what I mentioned, that you have no guarantee that the eigenvector Xi that you have here is going to be the one that we will recover at the end here with the pattern of distortion that gave rise to the polarization of your system. And here you prove that actually it is the case, That's the pattern of distortion that you find in the follicular phase of barium titanate is almost 100% coming from the soft modes initially calculated at the cubic phase. So it was a calculation done by Philippe Gauzet and Xavier Ganz in the 90s that was confirming that the soft mode theory hypothesis is actually valid. Because if you suppose that the phase transition is driven by the soft modes, if you suppose that the soft modes, you have a condensation of the eigenvector of these soft modes, actually is what you find it is true, because you take the real distortion at the end, you project against the eigenvector of the phonon corresponding to the unstable mode, and you find that indeed you have a full overlap between the two. Okay, this is confirming that, actually, this soft mode theory is quite valid, and from the DFT, you see you can make a link between, even if it is a high symmetry, high temperature phase initially, you can still get some calculation out of that, even if you do it at 0 Kelvin. Okay, so now let's continue. As I mentioned, we made this tetragonal effect, but we have seen that the ground state of barium titanate is not tetragonal, it's rhomboidal. Now we take the tetragonal phase and we recompute the phonon dispersions. Again, it's what I was mentioning, this is the deal, that you start, for every phase, you compute the phonon dispersion and you check if you have a remaining instability. And indeed, for this tetragonal phase, you find that you do the phonon dispersion and you recover a gamma instability. And if you check the eigenvector of this gamma instability, you find that there are the polar distortion along the x and y direction that are missing actually in the structure. Here we have condensed the structure with polarization along z. And this mode now is not anymore unstable because now it is away from the cubic phase. But you still have the polarization along x and y direction that still give rise to phonon instabilities. And this means that again you can condense along x, you get the orthorhombic phase, and you condense along x, y, z, and you end up to the R3M phase with the polarization in the three directions that correspond to the experimental measurements. And again, you can make photon projection and you recover the same story at the end. Okay, now out of that, you want to eventually build a Landau theory model out of it, because we have seen that we have a direct connection between the Landau theory macroscopic order parameter and the microscopic one in the case here of displaced flat transitions. So what you do here, we have seen that if the polarization that is coming from in the structure is directly proportional to the eigenvector of the cubic phase of the soft mode, that corresponds here to the macroscopic order parameter Q that I've defined before. And it means that we can make this free energy expansion with respect to the eigenvector of the unstable modes. And you can see is what you do, that you from the DFT calculation, you put different amplitudes of Xi. It's the black dots that are here. So you compute from DFT all these black dots here, and then you fit energy expression like that against that, and then you find the double well that is a fit out of the black dots that are here. And then ideally here, the Xi0, the minimum you have here, is what we have seen before for barium titanate is valid. It corresponds to the delta distortion, final distortion you have in the ground state at the end. And on the top of that, now to be complete, we don't have only this pattern of distortion Xi, we also have the distortion of the cell parameters. And we have seen that the structure is becoming tetragonal, so it means in your Landau expression, you need to introduce also the strain into your system that are represented here by eta here. You need the strain along x and the strain along z because you have a tetragonality appearing into the system. So the z direction is going to expand and the x and y direction are going to shrink. So it means you take into account that, and so you add the strain in energy coefficient in your system, and in front of it you have the elastic constant that can be calculated from DFT. Here you have C11 and C13 for the shear and the direct elastic constants. And you need also to introduce the fact that you have a coupling between the strain and this polar distortion coming from the eigenvector. And basically, this typical coupling you have is between the strain along z and the distortion along z, and the strain in plane with distortion along z, with a given coefficient g here that you can fit again against the DFT calculation. So it means that you can build, you see, a complete Landau expression. And out of that, what you see, why adding the strain is quite important, because if you solve again the previous expression analytically with only polarization along z, and you find that the strain is going to renormalize the nonlinear term here, the power 4 term in Xi. And this means that, this beta correction is going to depend on, just going to come from that. So you have C11, C13, G33, and G13, you see, when you solve that, it has to be equal to 0. You find that solution, I give you a renormalization of the Xi4 term. And what you find here, that this beta coefficient is negative. It's what you obtain here is that without strain, you have the red curve here, the double well. And when you once you introduce the strain, you find the green curve that is here, and you see that the minimum is a bit lower in energy and with a bit higher, larger amplitude. And adding the strain, you see, often give rise to a negative contribution to the Xi4 term, and is really important because now we're going to shift to late tightened where the phase transition is coming from the cubic to the tetragonal phase only. And in late tightened, the phase transition is clearly of a first order type, means you have a full jump at the critical phase temperature of the order parameter will be the polarization here. You see that it's 0 and start to be non-zero suddenly. And where this is coming from, actually, this is coming from the coupling with the strain, because in late tightened, when you do the fit from DFT, you find that the beta coefficient is negative, but is also negative, but is larger than the B coefficient that is positive here. This means that in late tightened, you end up with a coefficient here that is negative and a coefficient in front of the Xi4 term that is negative as well. And from the Landau theory, what distinguishes between the second order phase transition and the first order is the fact that the Xi4 term here is negative or positive. So second order, this coefficient is positive, and first order, this coefficient is negative. And this means also that you need to go higher in the Taylor expansion, otherwise you have only negative coefficients here. And this is, here we go really quickly, is then you can build that for late tightened. And then once you have the Landau model, you add this temperature dependence and the critical temperature you have from the experiment, for example, here. And then you can extract here the electric susceptibility versus the temperature. Here, this is a calculation, you can plug that into a Python script or Mathematica to solve that. And here you recover that the fact that the electric susceptibility is diverging around the critical temperature. Here, this is the tetragonality of the cell, the C over A ratio of the cell parameter. And you find that at the critical temperature, it is jumping to a non-zero value and then evolve as a square root with respect to the temperature. The same for the polarization that you can compute from your model. And you find that the polarization is going to jump at the critical temperature to a non-zero value and evolve with the square root evolution. And then you can also add the electric field into your Landau expression, and then you can probe also the hysteresis loops for different temperatures. Here are the red and blue for 2 different temperatures in your system. So you see from the DFT calculation, finally, even if it is done at 0K, you can extract different parameters and build a Landau model and deduce some different properties that are really useful at the end to compare with the experiments. And I don't have the time. I hope I'm not going too much beyond. No, okay. And how much time I have? I'm lost into the, I guess I am already 1 hour. I see your hands, but I don't know how much.
Eric, what? It would be good if you could stop quite soon.
Okay, okay, so then I'm going to go quickly. So that's why I often speaking too much. But anyway, then for transition tightened, you have the same type of thing. You do the phonon dispersion and you identify new instabilities on the top of the polar one that are correspond to the octahedral rotations. And again, you condense the phonon modes in the different combination and so on. And you find that the ground state corresponds to the experimental ground states I4 MCM, providing the fact that you have transition tightened is quantum paraelectric or incipient ferroelectric, in the sense that the DFT predicted is supposed to be ferroelectric, but the quantum fluctuation, if you add them properly, that's going to kill the polar distortion. But from the DFT is what you observe indeed. Okay, that I can jump as well. And then I will finish with that, the fact that when you make this, when you have many instabilities, you can have, your free energy expansion can be more complicated in the sense that you see you can have a double well for one mode, a double well for a second one, and so on and so on. But this means when you have more than one modes condensing into the structure, you can have coupling between the modes. And then you can have, the thing is that you can have coupling between the modes, but you can have coupling between the modes that are unstable and the modes that are not unstable. And this means that when you have that, I will show quickly you here, for example, for the hybrid improper for electricity, is the fact that for the polarization here, you have a single well energy shape. This means that the A coefficient here is positive. It means you cannot lower the energy with respect to the polarization. But you can end up with two other order parameters, Xc2 and Xc3, that have a negative A coefficient here, harmonic coefficients. And the thing is that this means that you can lower the energy with respect to these two order parameters, Xc2 and Xc3. But the thing is that if you have a coupling with respect to the polarization, that would be can be of this type here, Xc2, Xc3 times P. This means that once Xc2 and Xc3 are non-zero, this term is non-zero, and this means you can induce a polarization in your system even if you don't have a double well with respect to the polarization at the beginning. And what we call that's why we say polarization is not a primary order parameter but a secondary order parameter. In the sense, it is driven by other order parameters that are Xc2 and Xc3 here. As you can see it as finally you still have a single well, but due to the presence of Xc2 and Xc3 and this coupling, this single well can be shifted to a non-zero value of polarization and is lower in energy. And this means that you can have a ferrotic translation, a displaced translation through through a phonon mode that are imaginary but that are not polar at the beginning. So that means that it's valid for the polarization and ferroticity, but it's valid for whatever unstable mode of phase transition you have in your system. So here I will not go into detail because Julien Varignan will show you much more details and examples with this type of couplings, but then I will stop here. And then if you have questions, I have my other slides as well here. And then I will very quickly finish with that. The fact that we can still have access to the full temperature effects at the atomistic level is what we call the ab initio molecular dynamics. But the problem that's to do that from ab initio, is really CPU time consuming. It takes a lot of CPU time. And often what you want to do is to reduce the interaction to the main one you want to take into account. And you use the DFT to fit some models, like we have done it for the Landau model, for example, but we can do other models that are much more atomistics. And basically you use the DFT to fit some models that are taking into account the atom, the spins, the electron, or the strain, and the coupling between them. And then do a simplified model that keep the DFT precision, but where you, by simplification of the model, you can go and add the temperature effects that will cost much less. And the typical two type of models that are used are the effective Hamiltonians that is really similar to what I've presented, how we build the Landau model from at the microscopic level, let's say. And another type of atomistic simulation that are more and more fashionable right now is what we call second principle atomistic potentials. And here I will not present it because we can, if you are interested by that, you can see there is a poster of Louis Bastogne, a guy from our team here, that is doing a second principle model for lead titanates. And this means that they can take into account fully the temperature effects and eventually with much bigger cells, because with DFT, you have access to a few hundred of atoms, and with second principles, you can have access to a few hundreds of thousands of atoms. So you can have a much bigger cells and add the temperature fluctuations and so on and so on. Okay, and then I will here, at the end, you can have access to different main references that give you. And often in my slides also, I have different links and so on, and hyperlinks are active into the PDF, so you can click directly and go directly to the reference when it is active, unless it is a book. Okay. Okay, thank you for your attention. So let's go run with the questions now.